Welcome to 2025. And I'm excited to present this because indeed this is an eventful year astrologically. Many changes in new ingresses, and I'm excited to unpack this, understanding that the more informed we are, the better our decisions. It doesn't take away possible struggles, but being more conscious helps us really align with the intentions of the energy. And that is part of the evolutionary premise, is that every placement has an intention, an evolutionary intention. And the planets just reflect the higher intelligence, the fact that it's a cosmic clock and each planet is the hand of that clock. So being more in tune with the time, what time is now astrologically, helps us ride those waves, understand the cycles, so we can better harmonize with them. Let's dive in. And here, this is a brief overview of some of the changes coming up. Pluto's been in Aquarius since 2023, on and off, but now it's fully in. And the nodes just moved into Virgo Pisces in January. So it's an 18-month cycle for this new axis. Neptune will move into Aries end of March and Saturn in June. They will come very close together end of June, early July, almost an exact conjunction, but they'll retrograde back. And then Uranus in July moving into Gemini. Along with that, Jupiter moves into Cancer in June as well. And that is very important because it will be one of these planets that will be in water signs when all the others, except for the nodes, are into air and fire signs, which are masculine signs. Energy moving from center outwardly. So Jupiter in Cancer is a balancing factor here to internalize, emotionally process everything that's going on. Now, before we dive in, I want to invite you, of course, to not only listen to what I say in this video, but to also actually understand it. And so I invite you to consider and to join the educational programs that I'm offering. There's a program for absolute beginners. And so if you're just wanting to have some foundations and understand how these astrological cycles work, what are the parameters? So it's going to give you enough information to feel that you're not lost and that this, when we speak about these terms, it doesn't fly above your head. So astrology is recognized now as one of the most important tools of self-awareness. So I really think it is a worthy investment to get the beginner's package if you don't want to go into more serious and, a full 2-3 years program. But that is also available for those of you who would like to, become fluent, master astrology. This program has everything from A to Z to prepare you, not only in understanding the star knowledge and these incredible cycles, but to learn how to synthesize, because that's where most people are struggling. They know, what Uranus means and what Pluto means, but how do they actually work together? how do all the chart components work together? That is, some of the more difficult things that you cannot learn from books. You need practice and you need supervision. So the advantage of joining now is that it's a mid-term enrollment. The full enrollment started in 2023. So joining now, you would be included in the current cycle, which is cycle 14, and then merge into cycle 15 when it begins, probably end of 2025. So the advantage is that you get, for the same price, you get double exposure, more practice sessions, more workshops, because you join basically 2 cycles. The website, mauricefernandez.com. Another thing to introduce you, I've started a Patreon membership. This allows you for really a minimal fee to not only support the work, but also get a lot of additional bonus information, new workshops that are not published, on my channel. So it's exclusive knowledge, and also discounts on readings, discounts on workshops. So the reason I started this is that I plan to dive deeper into writing this year, and this means that I will cut my travel. And that, of course, affects my sustainability. And, this is a way to contribute. If you can, support this work, support these offerings, support the legacy of this deep knowledge. Patreon.com/C/Maurice Fernandez. So I'm going to speak primarily about the first 6 months of 2025. That's where most of the action is, so to speak, but also because there's so much material and so much to cover that I don't want to overwhelm you. So speaking of this period of January to July, I would divide this into 2 most important sections. The first one, between now January, at least until the end of March, early April, is flavored by a lot of energy in the water signs. The nodes just moved into Pisces. They conjunct the ruler of Pisces, Neptune. And soon, Saturn in Pisces will join. Now, think about any planet that is on the nodes is amplified. It gains more attention. It dominates the field. So Neptune in Pisces on its north node, conjunct Saturn, brings definitely this oceanic vastness that brings both magic, spirituality, and also, the great unknown, layers that we cannot always see through. On top of that, the transit of Mars retrograding into Cancer is staying longer than usual in the sign of Cancer. So Mars will be in Cancer until April, mid-April. So this combination of a lot of Pisces energy, Cancer, Mars, and then the eclipses in March are going to be, of course, close to the nodes, so more Pisces energy. One of the, fundamental qualities of water is definitely, touching on vulnerabilities. And that means doing deeper work. It also means there's less control and a need to be more patient with process. So with water, there's a lot of internal energy. I would say more compassion, because we are more aware of vulnerability, we're also more inclusive and more understanding, and possibly, it can be a unifying quality, but as well, that vulnerability. So, excuse me, as we see what's going on in California and Los Angeles, and we see those fires, we see people who are otherwise very powerful, the whole Hollywood elite, and people who are generally doing well. I'm not saying that only wealthy people have been affected, but a lot of them are. And we see people who are otherwise, on top of their world and in command, um, experience this feeling of intense vulnerability, unpredictability, and that also dissolves the differences when we see someone strong needing help. So it's humbling, and we're all in for it. It's not about bank accounts. It's about being in touch with a place where we need a break, where we need support, where we can help one another. So there's beauty in that vulnerability. And we're going to, also see how this may impact larger dynamics, politically, socially, and of course, personally, because at the end of the day, this offering here, this overview of the planet is all about how you can align, make the best of everything. So the strong water may also bring, a climate that is more humid. Now, it's interesting, since we look at the map of the United States as far as weather, we see the East Coast is freezing, and record snowfalls and really low temperatures. And then the Southwest is in some kind of drought. It's not a long-term drought. It's mostly this year, but not much rain in California, not much rain in Arizona. And so it's interesting to see if this now will shift as all this, water movement is gathering, the wave is gathering. Will this eventually lead to a shift where there's more water? And of course, the risk is too much water. So water themes are going to be strong, at least for 3-4 months, and all that entails, both externally and internally. Then the other phase that is going to really be critical this year is going to be June and July, where many planets, Saturn, Neptune, Jupiter, and Uranus, are moving from water signs, earth signs, more introverted signs, traditionally known as feminine signs, which are energy moving internally, are shifting to these extroverted energy, air, fire. And so it's a radical, radical change of energy. Also a lot of mutable signs, planets immutable signs shifting to cardinal signs. And when planets are making that transition, there is usually a new chapter in a person's life, a blank slate. So that 0-degree cardinal is going to be activated over and over again in the course of this year. The first part was the nodes moving from 0 Aries to 0 Pisces. So, if we just understand this first transition, think about, the past 18 months, 2023, mid 23 to now, January 25, the North Node was in Aries, South Node in Libra. And the nodes transits are extremely central to our development. It can touch natal planet, but just by sign, they are, a powerful force. So when the nodes were in Aries, it was all about personal agency, the need to find our voice, and the need for liberation for any form of oppression. So if you felt oppressed at work, if you felt misunderstood, if you felt that you were not really living your truth, that North Node in Aries could have helped you make the necessary change, find your trajectory, find how you can liberate yourself. And we see this, of course, with what has been going on politically with the Ukraine wanting to free itself from, the Russian dominion. And, we can say the Russian are trying to free themselves from NATO. So everyone has their reason to be and their need to defend their sovereignty. One of the tragedies of Aries is that on the one hand, there's a lot of purity in really birthing yourself and liberating yourself. But unfortunately, sometimes it shows up in ways where I liberate myself at the expense of someone else. We see that in the United States with Chiron in Aries and the United States going through its Chiron return. You can see that video I have on my YouTube channel, the Chiron return of the United States, where on the one hand, the United States, speaks about being the land of the brave and the free, home, land of the free and home of the brave. And at what cost? So you free yourself and you take that freedom from the Native Americans and you enslave Africans. So that is the paradox and the shadow side of Aries. And so as the nodes were in Aries, everyone is fighting for their freedom. And we of course see that as well in the Middle East and Israel and the Palestinian cause, which, ironically started with October 7 and this tragedy of attack of, people being taken into tunnels, how Plutonian that is. But then the retaliation being so over the top, so destructive, and as much destruction that happened in Gaza, the more attention it gave to their liberation cause. So it put the Palestinian cause really not just on the map, but at the very top of priorities. Something that was before, this tragedy, before that was, almost, I won't say forgotten, but was sidelined. Um, and so that was part of this Aries liberation, which ended with the Syrian liberation. Assad having to flee his country and, prisoners coming out of these incredibly, these dungeons and these horrific conditions. So that is part of the legacy of the North Node in Aries. Now it's moving into Pisces, conjunct its North Node. And one of the things I've been saying is that as Aries is all about standing up for yourself, freeing yourself, finding your own sovereignty, it also, is about standing proud. And it can lead to power struggles. It can lead to not giving in, wanting to really make sure you don't compromise. And now that the nodes are shifting into Pisces with Neptune, we start to see the cracks in those proud stances, where we didn't want to compromise. Pisces North Node speaks about looking at the bigger picture, not getting caught in the moment. How long are you going to sustain this war? How many people need to die in order for any aim to be achieved? So this Piscean energy is humbling in that it allows for seeing what's sustainable and what isn't, and getting over the pride. And I'm saying necessary pride, from an Aries point of view, the fight was necessary. But from a Piscean point of view, we need to look at what can be sustained and what needs to be relinquished, surrendered. So there is hope in that sense of seeing any kind of hard stance, any kind of, boulder standing super strong, softening. Now, I also recommend that you read my article and view the video that I posted on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. It's on my website, mauricefernandez.com. Look for articles and you'll see it. So it's all about discussing this new cycle, which will be dominated by Saturn-Neptune conjunction. First of all, both on the North Node in Pisces, and then both of them moving in June in Aries. So there is a lot of ideal of sacrifice with Pisces, how the one person needs to serve the greater whole. And the risk with that is that the one person dissolves to a point where they lose themselves in the whole. So the concept of martyrdom is a Piscean concept of extreme sacrifice. And of course, Jesus kind of started the Pisces age by, inspiring us to give the other cheek and to almost, encourage suffering, because being in the material dimension is not what's important. It's the spiritual dimension that matters for Pisces. And so when we see what has been happening is that, interestingly, you look at what's going on collectively and you see that those who are considered the victims are those who are gaining power. And I'm saying that, not in a negative connotation, but just as a matter of fact. For example, with Saturn in Pisces, we see Donald Trump's figure, how he's portraying himself as the martyr, how, the press is trying to get him, and the system is against him. And the more lawsuits are, projected on him, the more attention he's getting. And people elevate him to a place of being this martyr. And he wins the election. And that's part of the Saturn in Pisces signature. That sometimes the more you hammer someone, the more recognition they get. And that also happened with the Palestinian people. That the greater the suffering, the greater the martyrdom, the more the cause is becoming prominent, important, and urgent. And it's part of the tragedy of Pisces that sometimes so much suffering needs to happen for any change to occur. So we are in it, and we need to kind of heal from that, because the risk is that we may perpetuate suffering as a form of perpetuating martyrdom. We need to kind of internalize, understand that we can achieve goals without tragedy, without wars, and without martyrdom. This is something that will definitely be on the agenda, with Saturn, Neptune being on the North Node. Interestingly, Venus is now in Pisces, and so it's moving with Saturn in Pisces, and then will join Neptune in Pisces at the tail end of Pisces. And Venus in Pisces definitely brings this need for spirituality. Venus rules the sign of Taurus. So in general, Venus represents materialism, how we are incarnated in the physical dimension. And this is why Venus represents physical beauty and aesthetics and taste and senses, the touch and the smell and the taste, all these physical sensations which make our life pleasant. So Venus pacifies us. When Venus is in Pisces, it is a Venus that doesn't really highlight the material. Kinds of forget about its material roots, and it can dissolve materialism. Sometimes rightfully so, to the right extent, sometimes overly so, to the point where, again, we become too detached from our bodies, don't pay attention to our health, don't eat properly. Again, there's a video I did on that, on the Venus-Neptune octave. If you have Venus-Neptune aspects, Venus in Pisces, see that video. It's very important. But Venus coming on the conjunction with Neptune continues this pacifying, unifying quality. And then it moves into Aries, but then retrogrades back to Pisces. So Venus is also going to be traveling between early Aries, end of Pisces, for several weeks into the month of April. Now, Venus has also an exaltation degree. It's kind of a degree where Venus comes really strong, and that's 27 Pisces. So it will cross that exaltation degree conjunct Neptune several times. The star point of Venus is when Venus conjuncts the Sun, and that's going to happen at 2 Aries this year on March 22nd. The eclipses, of course, lunar eclipse on March 13, solar eclipse on March 29. And then Mars having been retrograde in Cancer, will eventually move to Leo again in, in April. And it will make its last square to the sun. So one of the things you need to pay attention to when the nodes shift, you also look at the rulers. When they were in Aries Libra, Venus and Mars were critical in our charts and in the sky. So now that we have shifted to Virgo Pisces, we need to look at Mercury and Neptune. And if you look at traditional rulers, you also include Jupiter. So now, as we are just in the beginning of this new cycle of the nodes, they're going to stay there for 18 months. So until the middle, kind of July, August of 2026. And because it's that inception degree of 0 Aries 29, the beginning of the zodiac, a lot is being seeded now. A lot of the changes, the purification is happening in this beginning of 2025. Now, looking at the rulers, you see the South Node is in Virgo and the ruler is in Capricorn, Mercury. So it's very earthy, very practical. It has to do with strategy, with sustainability, with how to make things work, how to make our lives work. And then the North Node in Pisces speaks about not just how we make our life work on a practical level, but how we make our life work on a spiritual level. What does that mean, make our life work on a spiritual level? Basically, Pisces speaks to Virgo in saying, okay, you checked your list, you have a job, you're healthy, the dishwasher is working, you have plans for your future, you're going to get organized to, get a promotion. So all these practical measures and steps and visions to make sure you're safe, to make sure your life functions. But the Pisces question is, are you happy? Whatever you're doing, is it working for you? And that is part of what I was talking about when I was talking about the, studying astrology. You may know all the parts, the Virgo stuff. You may know what Saturn means. You may know what Jupiter means. You may know, all these different components. But the Pisces question is, how does it all work together? Can you actually read a chart? Can you actually synthesize things properly? So the same question happens in our own lives. You have a good job and you have a good relationship and you have this that works. So everything in their compartment is at its place, but does it all work together? Is your life making sense to you? And that is the deeper North Node Neptune question. When we look at our world and we see, oh, we have this privilege and we fly to space and Jeff Bezos is about to launch a new rocket and we have faster internet and we can connect with each other on the internet much faster. I can connect with all of you through the internet thanks to technology. Is the world doing well? Are we as a collective in a place of happiness and sustainability? So that is the dichotomy of these nodes, is how to fix the parts, South Node, And how does it all need to work together? North Node in Pisces. And many of us are going to ask those questions. So part of the Neptunian paradigm on the North Node is really asking what needs to happen in order for your life to be complete. And I will add as well, where is the magic? Where is the soul? Where is what really glues everything together? And it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be the simple pleasures, you know. Then, as I mentioned, later this month, February 1st, March 27, and May 2nd, we're going to have Venus conjunct Neptune, its higher octave. So that is going to happen also on the North Node. The first two are happening in Pisces, 27, the exaltation degree of Venus, then 29, right as, and Venus is retrograde on March 27 at 29 degrees, right as Neptune shifts into Aries. So Venus conjuncts Neptune at 29, and then 3 days later, on March 30th, Neptune moves into Aries. And then they meet again in Aries on May 2nd. So what we often have in Venus-Neptune conjunction is, first of all, like I said, it's a unifying quality. So maybe this can signal a moment of peace, a moment of humility, a moment of, relinquishing our hard and rigid stances, softening. So hopefully we will see some of that, and it will materialize not only conceptually, but practically, which is then the South Node in Virgo. How do we actually bring this into form? How do we actually make it sustainable so that it's not just a desire for peace, but a plan for peace? And so this higher octave of Venus has to do exactly, this interplay between Venus and Neptune has everything to do with our sense of satisfaction. How can we pacify, and how can we remember why we're doing the things that we're doing? So I'm going to explore offering some workshops about this conjunction and about the star point that Venus creates with the sun. But just keep in mind those times, those dates where it can be great time for a ritual. It can be a great time to call, that lost brother that drifted out of radar, where there's some resentment and unresolved emotions. It can be a time to soften our stance and to actually reconnect. March 28 is when we have this cluster, right, on the North Node. And look at this 29-degree Pisces on the North Node, Moon, Neptune, Venus, and Saturn nearby. Then Mercury is at 0 Aries, but about to retrograde also into Pisces. And it's very interestingly, remember that Neptune and Mercury are the nodal rulers. Mercury rules the south node, Neptune rules the north node. When the nodal rulers are together, it's a time where things can be resolved. It's a time where things can come together or important decisions are made. If you're born with that, rulers of the nodes conjunct, it often means that it's a primary incarnation for you. It's an incarnation that will kind of seed a series of sub incarnations. So it's super, super important. But see how incredible this is that Neptune moves into Pisces 2 days later. And so they kind of switch sides. Mercury retrogrades into Pisces as Neptune advances into Aries. And so the rulers of the nodes are going to be going through this back and forth on the 029 degrees, which are seeding points, which brings the collective and the individual, which means brings fate, Pisces, free will, Aries. And how can we as individuals find our individual path in the greater Piscean scheme of things? So a quick note about Saturn being on the North Node. Whatever planet is on the node is becoming very prominent. It gains a lot of influence. Saturn represents karma. And so when Saturn is on the nodes, especially the North Node, it's kind of a time for accountability. It means we need to realign with what is right, with a greater sense of order, with integrity. So those who have done the work can reap the rewards during this time of Saturn on the nodes. It can be a time where we feel rewarded and get a promotion, some kind of opportunity shows up. On the other hand, if we lack integrity and we didn't really measure up to the expectations, this can be a time where the cracks are showing, where there can be a scandal, there can be basically some kind of possible downfall of people who are in position of power. And there, again, it's water, so it brings vulnerability. Suddenly those who stood strong are exposed in a vulnerable light, and we see the cracks showing. And that also means that one of the risks of Saturn in Pisces is neglect. So some kind of a sense of incompetence. There could be some kind of collapse, some kind of mismanagement caused by whoever is in charge not doing what they're supposed to do, or not being accountable, not being serious in their commitment. And so it can show basically a weakening of the leaders, of a leader, of someone in our environment who was always perceived as the rock or the role model, experiencing some kind of crisis. And so we may see during this time, and that extends, like I said, from the end of March for several weeks into May. So the whole month of April, basically, Saturn is exactly on the nodes. And, we may see leaders giving up, falling down, collapsing, and it's the collapse of towers. Again, under the condition that there's some kind of mismanagement. So Saturn basically is not very forgiving. The same way that karma is not forgiving. Karma can be patient. You may not get the feedback right away, but when it comes, it comes. And so this combination of energies where we have on the one hand eclipses, and then we have Saturn coming on the nodes, and Saturn is also going to be central on the eclipses, which I'm going to soon talk about, brings this urgency to realign, to do the right thing, to restore, to come clean, to restore integrity, and expose corruption of any sort. So it's going to be interesting, right, to see how this unfolds. The eclipses. So back to March, March. A lot is happening in March. Mars went direct in February 22nd. It's now still on that degree. It's going direct on 17 degrees Cancer. When Mars goes direct, it releases a lot of energy. Think of that Mars building up, feeling the vulnerabilities, feeling the need for change, feeling rebellious and emotional because it's in Cancer. Then it goes direct. There's some kind of, gaining traction and a lot of energy being released. That energy can be very creative, where you feel like, let's go, let's change, I'm ready. But it can also release all the resentment that was held back or that was festering during the retrograde. This is why, worst case scenario, many wars started when Mars went direct. 9/11 happened after Mars went direct. And, these are dramatic examples. It doesn't have to go that way. But, World War II started when Mars went direct a month later. So Mars releasing that energy needs to be channeled constructively. And eclipses, which happens, 3 weeks after the Mars goes direct, is exactly that time where Mars is in full release energy. And eclipses are also accelerators. This basically brings a lot of intensity, but it can also bring resolutions. The fact that Neptune and the Sun are in Pisces on the North Node doesn't feel like going to war to me. So I'm hopeful that that's not going to be the scenario, that it's actually, advancing a more compassionate agenda. However, it is a time of reckoning. Saturn, see that the eclipse occurs not only with Saturn close to the North Node, but the Sun is right on Saturn, opposing the moon. Lunar eclipse is the full moon, so they're both opposite the same degree. And that is a time of major decisions, of important, important development. What is very interesting is that this axis of Virgo Pisces has to do with employment. jobs, work. Jupiter is in Gemini, which has to do with education. So, in a very simple way, education allows for you to get a job, right? That's the mutable energy. Now, the last time we had similar configuration was in 2016. And in 2016 was one of the most dramatic migration crises, with Syrian fleeing their country and swimming to the shores of Europe through Turkey, through Greece. So you had this influx of people out of control, flooding the boundaries and dissolving the boundaries, Pisces. And that is a very similar signature. Now, this could happen anywhere in the world. We can eventually, I'll get more specific about where are the more sensitive points. But we know that part of Trump's agenda is to secure the borders and to deport many illegal immigrants out of the United States in record number. I mean, bases are being built now to make sure that this transition will happen. So when we speak about the Saturn-Sun conjunction and leadership coming to question, am I a good leader? Am I, doing things in a responsible way? Is there negligence? Are there going to be martyrs? Remember that during Pisces time, the more you beat up on someone, the more powerful they become. So the plight of the immigrant may gain attention. And the question is not just how it's being done and how people are feeling about it. Saturn says we need boundaries. Pisces says we're one. Mexico firefighters are coming to, and Canadian firefighters are coming to help in Los Angeles. So when there's pain and when there's need, we remember how unified we truly are. So how to make this border, Virgo, work in a practical way, and how to have a clear conscience, Saturn on the North Node. These are themes that are going to be part of our agenda. And I'm using the United States just because I'm more familiar with what's going on in this country, but it can apply on, with different causes and different cultures and places. Now, jobs, what is going to happen with the job market? We're talking about an eclipse, which is an accelerator. So when you deport many immigrants who are the labor force, what is going to happen to certain industries, agriculture and whatnot? These nodes are going to stay in Virgo Pisces for 18 months. So the issue of labor force, of employment and unemployment, and being laid off is going to really be critical in these 18 months, but specifically these first 4 months of 2025. So people may indeed voluntarily decide to change jobs, or there may be crisis in the job market. But with a crisis comes also opportunity. Somebody's pain is somebody else's opportunity. Somebody's loss is somebody else's opportunity. So the tables are turning for sure when it comes to the labor force, as this axis is now operational. And as Jupiter, Jupiter has to do with foreigners. It's in Gemini, which has to do with neighbors and multiculturalism. So how is this cultural energy, cross-cultural energy, affecting the job market? Are they going to grant visas? Are they going to allow some kind of immigration? Are they going to be, how harsh are they going to be? My feeling is that with the North Node in Pisces, you have to relinquish the harsh stance. You can't play tough guy when the North Node's in Pisces, conjunct Neptune and Venus. So will we learn to soften because the plan's not working, because it's logistically difficult? Will we learn to soften because there are going to be martyrs that are going to suffer, and we're going to identify with their plight? Or is there going to be a better balance between securing borders, securing, the job market, and at the same time balancing nationals from immigrants? This can also lead to natural events, questions about what is out of our control. Floods, there's a risk of flooding with all this water. So this is the first lunar eclipse. And the second one is going to be the solar eclipse, always come in pairs, 2 weeks from one another. And you see the solar eclipse is the new moon, and the solar eclipse is actually in Aries. But the nodes are still in Pisces. So because the lunation is far from the nodes, it's 12 degrees away, it means that the eclipse is not going to be total. Whereas the lunar eclipse is very close to the nodes, just 4 degrees, and so it will be a total eclipse of the moon, and here it's a partial eclipse of the sun. Same issues coming up, but the eclipse now is in Aries. So it's all about, as we are faced with these larger circumstances, as we need to surrender and pacify and embrace and soften, how can we reclaim ourselves? Where is our place in this larger dynamic? So it's about reclaiming our own sovereignty again. Aries, Pisces, dance. It's obviously a very creative time. It's deeply spiritual if you tune into this energy the right way. Now, it's also a time with Venus here on the North Node. It is definitely a time for reconciliation, to bring peace, to reconnect. But it can also be a time where economically, if we speak about job markets, Venus conjunct Neptune, retrograde, where financial markets are really unstable. Things can go up quickly and drown. Like I said, Venus in Pisces is not materialistic. And so it can be a bit carefree about, tangible value to the point where investments are not realistic, where it can be excessively optimistic and then, not sustainably so. Now, remember those degrees and those dates, of course. So write it down. See, the nodes are on 27 Virgo Pisces. So if you have any planet around 27 Virgo Pisces, the nodes are going to freeze on that degree. That's what happened during eclipses. That's why I use true nodes versus mean nodes, because we see that distinction. During eclipses, the nodes don't move. So they stay on 27, which is going to be a critical degree. If you have a planet there for about 6 to 8 weeks, that planet is going to be on steroids. So that's one degree. The second degree is the 23 Virgo Pisces, where the lunar eclipse occurs and conjunct Saturn, a moment of reckoning, a moment where decisions about your employment, about your next vocational steps are going to possibly be decided. A time where you will ask, is my life working? Practically Virgo, spiritually Pisces. Then the second degree to remember is that 9 Aries, where the solar eclipse occurs. So when I say eclipses are accelerators, I've often described this as it's a time when fate overrides free will. So changes can occur very rapidly, where you can decide to make a change, where you can decide to move, where you can meet a meaningful, significant other. So fated events can cause rapid change and accelerated development. Now, as it is with eclipses, fate gives and takes. So you may see things removed from your life and new things granted. Quite often, during eclipses is times when things that have been lingering for a long time are being activated. So if you waited for a long time to sell your house and it was on the market forever, suddenly during the eclipse it can happen. You can find a buyer. You've waited for some kind of job offer for a long time. Bang, the eclipse comes and does it. So eclipses are activators, accelerators. See where it lands in your chart and see, where that may unfold. And as you can see, March 29, Neptune is at 29:57, like the last minute of Pisces. The next day, it's moving into Aries, and that is the inception day, March 30th, 2025. So we have this end of March eclipse season and this ingress of Neptune in Aries with tons of back and forth of Venus, Mercury retrograde, meeting Neptune on the North Node. It's a big dance back and forth. And I cannot stress enough how important that is, that also the rulers of the nodes are implicated. So you need to plan something meaningful for that time. whether you do it very privately or whether you join us. Because I'm someone who wrote about Neptune, a whole book. And this transit of Neptune into Aries is monumental. So I had to organize an event that would celebrate Dreaming Neptune in Aries, where we're going to come together, and it's going to happen in two parts. The first part, I'm plugging this in now since we're in it. The first part is 4 lectures online about the theme of Neptune in Aries, Dreaming Neptune in Aries, where we are going to speak about the Neptune-Pluto cycle, the Neptune-Saturn conjunction, a Neptune through the signs, what happened in the previous generation with Neptune in Libra, Scorpio, Sag, until Aries. And so you can join, it's going to be on my website very soon. You can join this workshop online, and then you can join us in person. There's space for 12 people only. And we're going to be in Sedona doing ceremony, astrology, and dream time. So we're going to have dream circles and activate the dream to see how each one of us may dream a piece of the great puzzle. So a real, initiation. And my colleagues, Merriman and Rachel, amazing astrologers, but also incredibly graceful souls who, I've chosen to work with because they bring that Neptunian high frequency to this experience. So we're all very curious about what Neptune in Aries will bring. It's a 14-year cycle, saving a short retrograde back into Pisces by the end of the year. I'll talk about that in this video at the end. But what is Neptune in Aries? Right? It's very different energies. Now, keep in mind that Neptune also works with Pluto because they've been in a sextile for, almost 70, 80 years. So as Neptune moves into Aries, Pluto moves into Aquarius. And that kind of defines a lot of the directions that this energy and each one of them is going. So as I've discussed, we're going to cover that in the month of March, where we have a series of presentation, and one of them is going to be the Neptune-Pluto cycle. But think about the fact that some of the main themes that Neptune in Aries is going to bring is energy. Energy supply, and we're talking about global as far as the grid. Do we have what it takes to power our world? So whether, some leaders will want to revert to older form of energy productions, whether there are going to be new forms of energy. And there's, floating this new idea also of having smaller nuclear power plants. So instead of having huge stations, to have more isolated and more compact power stations that will be more efficiently and safely provide energy. So think about how, we are in the beginning of this cycle. But as it is with Neptune, this is part of what I covered in the book, which everyone is invited to get if you haven't yet, is that wherever Neptune moves, there is a bankruptcy happening. Something is extremely vulnerable in that industry, in that area of our lives, because Neptune, requires that whatever the themes represented by the sign need to be more evenly distributed. And I'm going to go into the specifics of that in the March sessions. So check my website for updates, because understanding how Neptune works is a riddle. It has its own weird logic. But as Neptune creates extreme vulnerability to the point of bankruptcies, it also becomes a game changer, which means that it forces humanity, personal, collective, it forces us all to um, to create new paradigms. Think how Neptune in Aquarius revolutionized the airline industry, and how all airlines after 9/11 went bankrupt. So many companies disappeared. Neptune disappeared. Only those who merged together and formed this, alliances, Neptune, prevailed. And that also was an era where flying became much more accessible financially, even though, it was all the security measures were beefed up. But this is part of Neptune's bizarre strategy, is that it takes away the control. And so here in Aries, we may face a serious, serious energy crisis. And I'm talking about how are we going to power our world, including Pluto and Aquarius, electricity. So we're going to have to rebuild our grids and rebuild them better, more efficient. But also it's going to bring to question how Pluto in Aquarius wants to advance the world, go to space and meet the aliens and whatnot. And how, do we have what it takes to actually power the new technology and the new advances? And where are we going to get our energy? Are we going to get our energy from space? Are we going to mine asteroids? That's going to happen with Neptune in Taurus. So on a personal level, it obviously speaks about powering your own life. And how do you have the energy to follow your dreams? Do you have the energy to become who you're meant to be? And with Neptune, there's always a lesson about understanding that some of it is not going to be in your control. That if you don't understand interdependence, relying on each other, and if you don't understand spiritual reliance, you may feel, again, running out of energy. So all these paradigms we are going to definitely speak more and more about. Videos, classes. Astrology is fascinating, and there's so much to learn because it teaches us about the lessons of life. And then we move into the second part. So that May is a preparation for what happens in June and July. Neptune already in Aries from March 30th. It's going to retrograde back to Pisces in end of October. Saturn moves into Aries on May 25th, and then again on February 15 next year. Jupiter in Cancer, June 9th. Uranus in Gemini, July 7th, and then retrograde back to Taurus, and final ingress April 26th. So a lot of shift from mutable to cardinal. Cardinal, zero. It's not just cardinal, it's zero cardinal. Zero Aries and zero Cancer. Repetition, nodes, da. So if you are planning to reinvent yourself, to start fresh, that's when it happens. That's when things are actually materializing. So June is, I will say, the moment of integration, the moment of the decision. So anything that happened between the March equinox, March eclipses, until June, everything's going to be in motion. Everything's going to be in flux. You're going to be in negotiation. You're going to sign new contracts. You're going to contemplate the moves and redirect your energy. And then by June, July, it may actually be that you are in this new place, with this new person, with this new job, with this new thing. And of course, some of us will feel it more than others. Not everyone is going to reinvent the whole wheel, but many will. So it's interesting what will happen on a leadership level. My suspicion, my estimation is that you're going to see a lot of people falling, a lot of leaders folding, and new voices rising. Now, this is the visual of this June solstice, where the sun is at 0, Cancer. It's going to conjunct Jupiter newly there. It's going to square Saturn, Neptune, and Ceres will be there. So that cardinality, we're going to unpack this more and more. I'm going to teach, by the way, in New York in May, New York City, in person. So both in Long Island and in Manhattan at the Theosophical Society. So if you're around, we are going to focus on this cardinal energy and how to use it, the ins and outs of that. Now, I'm also going to speak at Omega and organize this really special retreat. It's a conference retreat because it's in nature. And it's not only, it's one track. So the whole audience is with whoever is presenting. And there are presentations and there are also interactive sessions. It's amazingly beautiful. It's going to be in October, in the fall season, which is really spectacular in that part of the world. And the theme is the female archetypes in astrology. So if you want to learn more, just use, that QR code and you can find the page with the description of the program. It's both on the Omega Institute website and on my website. And if we look at the chart for the end of the year, we see, interestingly, that after all this fire and cardinal energy in the middle of 2025, everything retrogrades back to Pisces. Then we have this massive grand trine in water signs. Jupiter's going to be by then end of, this kind of and degrees of Cancer. Neptune retrogrades back to Pisces. Saturn retrogrades back to Pisces on the North Node, and all these Scorpio planets. So it's interesting interplay between this, very commanding, creative, externalized energy of fire, and then going back to a place of integration, processing, the sacred feminine. See how Jupiter is standing, at the apex there of this configuration, holding the space. So Jupiter is going to be particularly powerful in the sign of Cancer. And that's going to be more discussed in our part 2 of 2025. And so, yeah, I hope this gives you enough food for thought and material. And I hope you didn't fall asleep just yet. Many blessings. Stay healthy, stay safe, be in ceremony, honor the planet, and open yourself up to star knowledge. Thank you so much.